Not only our guest speaker, Jean Hutchinson, but we're extra happy to have her husband, Bill, with us tonight. And I'm familiar with both these people, and I've known them for about 65 years. So Bill's mother and father were friends of my parents when we were growing up. And I went to high school with Jean, and a bit of history would be that we both rode the very first school bus out of the Flesherton High School. So any of you, some of you most likely rode a school bus, but this was the very first one in that area. Agnes Macphail was born in Croton Township, in the same township that both Jean and I were raised, and this was near a little village called Hopeville. Croton Township, of course, is in the Grey County. When Jean and Bill were married, they lived near a little place called Priceville. I believe that was the rural, and that was where Agnes Macphail spent some of her teenage years. Later, Agnes lived in a house in Ceylon, which again is near where Jean and Bill live. Jean is a genealogist, a historian, and an author. Her most recent book is Elizabeth Harvey Ward Noon, and that's a book about the very first, or one of the very first that I can remember, midwives in Grey County, and actually two of my siblings were born there. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jean this evening, and would you give her a warm welcome? Thank you.
Well, with a glowing introduction like that, I better do well. I was born across the road from Glenn, so we've known each other for a long time. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to come tonight and share this tribute to Agnes. Now, can you hear me? I'm used to carrying this in my hand. I'd like to thank Mary Lou for preparing the PowerPoint presentation. This will indeed bring Agnes live as a real person. Working with pictures is something new to me, so you'll just have to bear with me. Agnes Macphail, the lady from Grey, as she was known across Canada and the world, was truly a remarkable person. Agnes Macphail, 1890 to 1954. I told somebody a while ago 53, but it is 54. Now, this is the stone house where Agnes was born. Some places it says she was born in the log house, but I understand that this was built, there was a lot of stone houses built at that time. And she was the daughter of Dougal Macphail and Harriet Campbell. And this is just west of the hamlet of Hopeville, if anybody knows where that is. It's in Southgate. Now we have Agnes as a little girl, all dressed up and posing with her mother. Here we have, well, this is Proton School. Okay, we'll go down to it. Agnes was much the same as all other little girls of the time. At 6 years old, she started school at number 4, Proton. And that's near Hopeville, if you've traveled between Dundalk and Montforest. And then we have a picture of the school, and I think Agnes is marked in that. Yeah, she's off to the side there. And next we have a picture of Agnes. Oh, this is the farm. We got these mixed up a bit. The Ceylon farm. Okay. When Agnes was 12 years old, the family moved to a farm west of the hamlet of Ceylon. Now, if you happen to be looking for that farm now, you would never know that it looks like this. And there's trees all planted around it, and There's another house built on the side of the driveway, and it's quite different looking. Life was very primitive in the 1890s. Horses were still the most reliable mode of transportation. Motor cars, telephones, electric power, and such likes. Radios and TVs were unheard of in South Grey. The family operated a small farm, and he was a prominent auctioneer in the area. Now this is the Ceylon farm. We're just ahead of ourselves a wee bit, just hold on. We're just past the Ceylon farm. 1902, when Agnes was 12 years old, the family moved to a farm west of the hamlet of Ceylon. Now, if you happen to be looking for it today, I mentioned that. I think our pictures in our story are a little off. The Durham Road School, Agnes attended the old Durham Road School, number 7, of Artemisia Township, now Grey Highlands. Agnes and her older sisters, with no brothers, took on many of the tasks that usually were assigned to boys. She was a very determined girl and did her share of farm work, but she had decided after finishing elementary school she wanted to attend high school and train to be a teacher, which was very much against her father's better judgment. Girls married, raised a family, worked in the kitchen on the farm. They didn't fill their heads with useless education. After her graduation, she was not allowed to go to school. The teacher at the old Ormond School, being sympathetic to her plight, persuaded her father to let her come to school and help with the younger children for a while. This continued for 2 years while she was also helping on the farm. There was many angry exchanges between her father. Against his better judgment, he finally agreed to allow her to attend high school. High schools were not available in Flesherton until 1910, so she enrolled in the Owen Sound Collegiate. This would be a hardship for her family, but her father agreed he must clear the air around the house. They found a boarding place with friends in Owen Sound, and the train was very useful in commuting, as it passed through Ceylon, a short walk from the farm. This was a tough time for Agnes. She was a rural girl in a city setting. She was looked down on and even shunned in some circumstances. Agnes excelled in every event she challenged and won various awards both in literary and sports. She was a very eloquent speaker with wit and humor. She graduated as an honor student. The family arranged with relatives. Now this picture is Agnes and Gertha, as you've noticed. They would be teenagers then. The family arranged with relatives in Stratford where she could stay and attend teachers' college. And the next one is a friend. I would say this was at graduation. Agnes loved a party and a dance. She was known to return from a dance at 5 a.m. and then up and away to school in the morning. Her resilience was amazing, but it took its effect on her health. She taught in several schools around the area and also spent 1 term in Alberta, becoming acquainted with farm problems in various areas. It was while she was teaching in Sharon, Ontario, that she became active in political affairs and joined the United Farmers of Ontario. In 1917, women next of kin of men in the services were allowed to vote. In the spring of 1918, the government extended the right to vote and hold office to Canadian women 21 years of age and older through the Wartime Elections Act, with Prime Minister Warden saying, women may exert a good influence on public life, and probably against his better judgment, but he did need more votes in the fall election. In 1920, she gave up her teaching and came back to Grey to recuperate from an illness and be with her ailing grandmother, whom she loved dearly. At this point, she was drawn into the plight of farmers in her community and went on speaking tours trying to improve their conditions. She encouraged co-ops and started the Federated Farm Women to get farm women socializing and acquainted with current events and encouraged to participate in community affairs. The people in this area seem to be very interested in politics, probably from the influence of Agnes. She started the Onward clubs. These were primarily for teenagers because many young people left school at the end of grade 6 or sooner, boys especially. With war and rumors of war at this time, they were needed on the farm. Food for the war effort was important. And now we've got Agnes in the 20s. She sponsored debating teams to encourage the young people to read, think, and become speakers, debating politics, economical problems from the farm point of view. Some of the local young people, especially Farquhar Oliver, how many of you have heard of Farquhar Oliver? Soon became very adept at the debating exercise, outshining other participants from the surrounding communities. She hoped to prepare these young people to take leadership roles in the community. The Onward clubs, also some sports teams who proved to be very competitive were organized to her. She supported school fairs and also agricultural fairs. Among other things, she was also a columnist for the Farmer's Son newspaper and later the Globe and Mail. She always had her eye on something higher. 1920, Agnes was nominated the UFO Independent Labour candidate for Southeast Grey, over 10 male nominees, by an enthusiastic crowd of farmers. With second thoughts the next day, some men were wondering if they were quite sane when they nominated a woman to stand for federal parliament. They even went so far as to ask her to decline. That wasn't in Agnes's plan. She had worked too hard to achieve this, and she wasn't about to decline. She ran a strenuous campaign, always working for the farmers and the underdog. She was a powerful speaker, and you would know immediately she was genuine. She traveled the constituency diligently, driving herself to exhaustion. The young farmer, Farquhar Oliver, her protege, and farmer too, and friend, who later became leader of the Liberal Party of Ontario, began his career by speaking on her behalf on many occasions. People were shocked at his intelligence and skill at such a young age. They called him the Wonder Boy. And now this is her dad in a horse and cutter campaigning for the South Grey in the South Grey December weather. One time when she was speaking in the arena, a man shouted from the crowd, "Don't you wish you were a man?" She, being very quick of wit, responded, "Don't you wish you were?" Agnes was a feisty woman and took on those men who tried to put her down. And now Agnes in her car. It sometimes left her on the road too. She was known to hitchhike the remainder of the way to her engagement. She did get a newer car as time went on. December the 6th, 1921, 5,000 women voted for the first time in the federal election. The day 99 years ago, history was made. I think it's 100 years ago now. A group of friends gathered at the Macphail farm to receive the results of the federal election. At the age of 31, Agnes Campbell Macphail was the first woman candidate elected to the federal government representing Grey South Riding, with a huge majority over the long-standing incumbent. Now we're at the Parliament buildings.
Before you do that, Jean, I screwed up here. There's your family.
Okay, that's the family. Yeah, okay. Agnes made history as the first woman elected to the federal house in Ottawa, just 2 years after women were declared persons and received the vote in federal politics. Now, her first day at the legislature. Now, that isn't my favorite picture of Agnes, but anyway, that's the only one we have. Her first day at Parliament, she was stopped in the lobby. A man asked her if she was lost. he'd be willing to escort her to the spectators gallery. March 22nd, she delivered her first speech in federal parliament, dressed in her famous blue serge suit. It was a scary experience for this young lady. I'm told there wasn't even a ladies' washroom in the Parliament buildings when she arrived. It was tough going for Agnes. The men didn't appreciate her invasion in the male world and considered her a threat to the male-dominated world of the time. No women had ever run for Parliament. Women were like children. They were to be seen and not heard. And inside the Parliament buildings, she was battered by the press and other politicians everywhere possible. She came from the farm where money was scarce, and she was very frugal with her expense account, which showed up some of the other members who submitted very extravagant expense accounts for entertaining and travel. She was a threat. She was fair game for disapproval and jealousy. It was impossible for her to go about her job quietly, but in spite of that, her accomplishments were many. She showed leadership and entrepreneurship to get elected to Parliament and had the ability to withstand the pressure when she got there. One of her famous slogans was, "Never apologize, never explain, just get the job done and let them howl." Agnes was not one to be trifled with. A woman way ahead of her time. Agnes was known worldwide for her international speaking engagements, which were largely attended around the world. She spoke widely in Canada and the United States, also Europe and England. She was the first Canadian woman to be presented to the King and Queen of England. She was advertised as the Lady Astor of Canada. Lady Astor being the first lady member of Parliament in England. Her speaking engagements in Europe were handled by Thomas Wilder of international acclaim, the same one that handled those of Winston Churchill. Now that's the dress she wore when she was presented to the Queen, the King and Queen, and it's in the museum in Old Sound, Roots Museum. She gave up marriage for a career, but that wasn't for the lack of a suitor. I understand she broke a few hearts by her refusals. In those days, married women were excluded from the professional world. Their place was in the kitchen, and as soon as they were married, they were passed over for teaching jobs also. Agnes knew if she married, she would be excluded, and that was not in her plan. Here she is with one of her proteges. I've lost his name, but she had several. Farquhar Oliver was the top one, and she had various other ones.
Mr. Jones.
Okay. She was now not joined by another woman in the House until 1935. She was truly a parliamentary pioneer of the time. Now, here's the Ceylon Road sign. In 1926, her parents sold the farm and purchased the house in Ceylon, where she came on holidays, and in most cases for rest and relaxation, which was ordered by her doctor on many occasions. Now, here's the family picture. Her mother and dad, Lily and Gertha. And the Ceylon home, which is still standing. And Agnes and some supporters. And we thought this was at the Ceylon home, but I got reading something else, and they said it was at where George Boyd lived in Flesherton. It was the Boyd home. And this is some of the Flesherton women. Now, I'm not sure who they are. It was at that time owned by Dr. Murray. And here's Agnes, probably reading a speech or a letter to her mother. And Agnes wrote regular letters to the local papers and the school to keep students and teachers abreast of happenings and encourage education. When she was in Ceylon, she was just Agnes. Larry can attest to that. We have a few people in this crowd that can remember some interesting happenings when she visited Ceylon. One woman told me Agnes would lounge in her pajamas until noon, writing letters and etc., and to the amazement of the neighbors would slip out to the post office next door to post them, still in her pajamas. She dressed for lunch, and the afternoon was spent entertaining and attending functions. Many local girls were employed as housekeepers for Agnes, both in Ceylon and Toronto. She kept the Ceylon house until her death. Later owners erected a plaque signifying her residence at the house. In 1920, Agnes Macphail emerged as the country's foremost advocate of fundamental human rights. Agnes understood communities under stress. She championed the disadvantaged, whether it was farmers or miners in Glace Bay, Nova Scotia, prison mates, or people living in the aftermath of war. She took action on what she learned. Her life covered the first half of the 20th century, a period of fantastically rapid change, and she brought those anxious, troubled years a high courage of warmth and understanding. She fought for women to have equal access to divorce, for family allowance and old age pension, and for pay equity. Some of these were accomplished after she left Parliament, but she laid the groundwork for them. These experiences led to founding the Elizabeth Fry Society in Canada. In 1920, she joined the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom and attended the Peace Conference. In 1929, she was Canada's first woman delegate to the League of Nations in Geneva, where she served on the Disarmament Committee. She wasn't afraid to stand up and defend her cause. She was the first woman to speak at Harthouse University in Toronto. She was the first lady to visit Kingston Penitentiary. In 1935, she was instrumental in appointing the Archibald Commission, which studied Canada's prisons. She worked against all odds to clean up the corruption and have proper staff put in place. Indeed, the inmates sent flowers to her funeral. And there's a copy of the card that accompanied it. And now the next one is Agnes and her mother. Her mother became very ill, and in 1927 her mother died. Agnes was back in Ceylon to be with her for a while. That's when this picture was taken. Agnes dropped the P from her name Macphail. Now some people may wonder why it's spelled 2 or 3 different ways, but anyways, it was much easier for her to write with a small p than a capital P. And she also, after a trip to Scotland and found out that her ancestors spelled their name M-A-C, she decided to put M-A-C in her name. So there's a little bit of change in her name over the years. Entertainment was important to her. Many people from her riding had memories for life after visiting her in Ottawa. And here she is dressed for a party. This may have been the dance given by Henry Ford and his wife, where she was invited, and she loved to dance. As the years went on, Agnes's colleagues coaxed her to other parties. I better start again here. As years went by, Agnes' colleagues were coaxed to other parties and the members became few. That's my point. No matter what incentive the Prime Minister offered, she never gave in. She hated the Conservatives just slightly less than the Liberals. When a snap election was called in March 1940, because the Prime Minister hoped for a stronger mandate, Agnes was very concerned as to the roads at this time of year in her riding, and complained of her concern to the Prime Minister, but he wouldn't bend. Most of his support was from towns and cities, so it makes you a little suspicious. Things never change, do they? We all know what kind of winter storms we have in this area, which impeded the farmers' travel to the polls to vote. She was defeated by weather in 1940, no fault of herself. The Federal Progressive Party disintegrated. After 19 years, she left Ottawa. Now, this is her house in Leaside. It's a beautiful big house, and I see the plaque beside it. She retired to a home in North York, actually Leaside, for a short time, and started writing for the Globe and Mail newspaper, and continued her speaking engagements, always battling poor health. She traveled to the U.S. with a Chicago group several summers, always lecturing on world affairs, and I'm told some of the actors in the group wanted to marry Agnes. With the, here's some women start showing up in this one. The UFO, notice women are beginning to appear. In 1942, she joined the Ontario CCF, becoming a farm organizer, and began to pursue provincial politics. And this is the Ontario Parliament. In 1943, she was elected to the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, the CCF, representing the Toronto riding of York East. Again, the first woman sworn into the provincial politics, from 43 to 45 and 48 to 51. Now, notice there's a gap there because she was ill and she had to take some time off. In 1951, she brought the first pay equity legislation in Ontario. Now they're trying to make us believe that's something new. The CCF in the legislature. Oh, here she is speaking under the coat of arms. Okay. Her career ended in 1951. She was disillusioned with the elements that were moving into the CCF. Running out of money, she returned to journalism and public speaking. Unfortunately, these jobs pay very little, and it was a very difficult time for Agnes. Money was scarce and her house was large, so she took in boarders to reinforce the budget. Some mentioned she was about to be recommended for a Senate seat, for the Senate, to get a pension, but she was 6 months short. 6 months short of the terms served to receive either one. Like, I better explain this a better. She was mentioned to be recommended for the Senate, or else to get a pension because her funds were running out. And but she was 6 months short. 6 months short of the time. So I don't think that would have happened today. At least the Prime Minister was stalling at that time. Agnes with the coat of arms, we see that. Agnes and Lily with twins. No, here she is speaking to the CCF in Toronto. And here she is with Lily and her twins. She was very fond of her family. And as we go on, she came back, she was aging in Ceylon. Okay, we've got, when she was in this downtime, I don't know where I have this written, but anyway, when she had this downtime, she wrote a book on her kinfolks. And I've never read it, I don't know. And here's an aging Agnes on the steps at the Ceylon house. Agnes was plagued with ill health over the years, probably brought on by overwork. She drove herself to exhaustion in many instances, which probably contributed to her early demise. Various times she was told she must slow down, but as soon as her feet hit the floor, she was up and running. Slow down wasn't in her vocabulary. Agnes was a lady of firsts, which are many, which has assured her a place in Canada's history books. These remarkable achievements, however, give us only a glimpse of her strength, her diligence, and her far-sightedness. Severe arthritis and blood clots impeded her movement, and a heart attack eventually took her life. Her career ended in 1951 when death made the last call at 64 years of age. She suffered her final heart attack on the way to a speaking engagement. She died February the 13th 1954 in Toronto. And here's her stone in Priceville Cemetery. It seemed fitting Agnes lived a stormy life, and she was laid to rest with family and friends in the McNeil Cemetery on one of the stormiest days in March 1954. Most of you know her as a picture in the library, museum, or parliament buildings. She was a real person and very important in the life of many. She was a feisty woman invading a man's world. Yes, Agnes was a real person. Agnes paved the way for all the women that followed her. And here's another plaque in her memory. And then this one is at Hopeville. It was erected in 1960, and that's Parker Oliver and her two sisters. And it was installed at the front of the store in Priceville at one time. But when the store was sold, they decided to move it into the ballpark. So they have it in the ballpark at the back of the store now. And there's a bronze bust of her near the Speaker's Chambers in Ottawa. She has several schools named after her. The Girls Vocational School in Hamilton, Ladies Resident at Ryerson University, Macphail Elementary School in Flesherton, and Scarborough, to mention a few. Now there may be other ones, but I don't have them here. County Road 9 in Proton Township, now Southgate, was named officially for her on a stamp. Officially for her in, it's about 10 years ago, I think. And here we have the stamp. And in my opinion, she was most deserving of honor. In 1990, she was honored on a stamp, the centennial of her birthday. 15 million were issued, 39-cent postage stamps. I understand they sell for much more now to stamp collectors, if you can find one. I was bitterly disappointed when her picture was not chosen for the $100 currency. But in May 2017, the $10 currency bearing her picture from 1920 was printed for the 150th anniversary. Maybe there was a better choice. This was a better choice because more people will see the $10 bill than will ever see the $100 bill. She was the first woman besides the Queen ever to grace the Canadian currency, and she was placed with some very high-profile Canadians. Two fathers of Confederation, John A. Macdonald and George Edward Cartier, and Canada's first Indigenous Senator, James Gladstone. There are postcards and flyers and commemorating things of the $10 currency on the table. Also some cards and flyers to explain checking Canadian Palomar notes for counterfeit copies. Please pick one if you haven't already done so. Agnes, the lady from Grey, was exceptional. She gave her life to serve the area of South Grey, not to mention the Toronto constituency and the Dominion. Agnes gave 6,685 days, which were to 18 years and 3 months, and 19 days in a rural constituency, without mentioning her time in Toronto. And this is my favorite picture of Agnes. Time does not allow me to list all her attributes or tell all the stories I know about her. At any rate, you have smartphones or computers. I encourage you to Google her name and find a full line of her accomplishments. These were truly amazing for a woman of that day in history. There's a nice tribute to her on the Grey Highlands and South Grey Museum site. I encourage you to check it out if you haven't. The fact that she was the first woman in so many incidents has assured her a place in Canadian history books. These remarkable achievements, however, give us only a glimpse of her strength, her diligence, her farsightedness. Agnes was a most powerful woman. Her goal was to leave the world a better place when she passed from it. She paved the way for all women in the future. Former Prime Minister John Diefenbaker was quoted as saying, "Canada produced 5 great politicians, and Agnes was one of them." And here's a nice sketch of her. Thank you. I become an authority on Agnes? Well, it was very simple. It was through no fault of my own, really. They declared her birthday, Agnes Macphail Day, in Proton and Grey Highlands, in Southgate and Grey Highlands a few years ago. And we were sitting around the table wondering what we'd do for a celebration. And we were talking about her. I said, I knew Agnes Macphail. Well, that's how it started. I dressed as Agnes Macphail at the first celebration and at the second one, but now it's kind of grown. I think we've had enough of that. And, but anyways, that's how I became an authority on it. And I see there's several people here, Larry and his wife and Bill and Glenn. Is there anybody else that knew Agnes? I think I asked this question before. Yes, okay. Okay, you have, I haven't got all the answers, but I'm working on it. Okay, don't forget to pick up something at the table. And of course, I brought along my book that I published and set it at the end there. It's on Bill's grandmother. She was a country midwife in our area.